HBO एक चैनल आता था बचपन में, there was a channel that we used to watch when we were kids. HBO, cut O into half becomes C. Okay, H for Hastings, B for Bentinck, and C for Canning. First Governor General was changed to Governor General of Bengal. Then we had Governor General of India, and then we had Viceroy of India. This is also very important. Under the Charter Act of 1813, proselytization. ठीक है, PODI, PODI. तो PODI याद करेंगे. P for portfolio. Portfolio क्या है? Recognize the portfolio system. So first P was portfolio. Second O is ordinances. Authorize the viceroy to issue ordinances without the legislative council's approval during emergencies, which is valid for 6 months. P for portfolio, O for ordinances. Decentralization. So portfolio, ordinances, decentralization. I is the inclusion of first time inclusion of Indians in the legislative council. Homework. अब तक जितना भी है revise all PYQs. The same homework as yesterday. Write your answers. Fourth, consolidate everything. Fifth, print out part B and spiral it.
What we understand, we conquer.
Did we all do the homeworks? सारे होमवर्क कर लिए थे. 3 होमवर्क थे. एक तो सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल फॉर्म ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी लिखना था. लिखा है क्या सबने? चलो पहले एक एक करके पूछ लेता हूँ. सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल, who all have made short notes or have read out about it? ठीक है, सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल के बाद था सेकंड होमवर्क क्या था? वेरी गुड अनिश. खुशी, there is no point if you read something and you're not making notes out of it or it's not at some place. PYQs, revision. सेकंड था रिवीजन ऑफ द होल डॉक्यूमेंट एंड थर्ड वाज PYQs. कितने क्वेश्चंस थे टोटल? PYQs में टोटल कितने क्वेश्चन दिए थे हमने? तो सबने सारे PYQs कर लिए हैं और जो भी डाउट्स हैं आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे. और तीसरा था हिस्टोरिकल अंडरपिनिंग्स. कौन कौन याद करके आए हैं? कौन कौन याद करके आए सारा हिस्टोरिकल अंडरपिनिंग्स? वेरी गुड. क्वेश्चन पूछ लूं फिर एक दो. फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया कौन थे? हु वाज द फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया? वेरी गुड. लॉर्ड कैनिंग नहीं थे. बहुत ही कॉन्फिडेंस से हम सब गलत आंसर दे रहे हैं. बहुत ही कॉन्फिडेंस से गलत आंसर देते हुए सबके सब. फर्स्ट वाइसरॉय ऑफ इंडिया कौन थे? हम ये पढ़कर आए हैं क्या? अगर ये पढ़कर याद कर सब कुछ रट कर और कॉन्फिडेंस से आंसर लिख रहे हैं तो फिर हमारी स्टेटस ऑफ प्रिपरेशन क्या है यार? ये तो हिस्ट्री जैसी चीजें हैं, तो इसमें कुछ समझाने का ही नहीं है, तो पूरा रटने का था. रटने वाली मैंने क्वेश्चन पूछा आपसे, वह तो बहुत ही गलत है. फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल कौन थे? तो 3 थे, हेस्टिंग्स, बेंटिक और कैनिंग. चलो कोई बात नहीं, एक दो क्वेश्चन और पूछ लेता हूँ चेक करने के लिए कि आप लोग पढ़कर आए हो या नहीं आए हो, क्योंकि पहले में तो आपने बिल्कुल ही गलत बोल दिया. 2 क्वेश्चंस है, 1 और 2 एक साथ टाइप करके आंसर में बताएंगे. ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस, ये पहली बार टर्म कहाँ पे आया था और क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज किस में अलाउ हुए थे? तो अब इसमें कुछ पढ़ाना है या आप लोग खुद ही कर लोगे? जल्दी बताओ. डू यू वांट मी टू टीच यू ऑल दिस क्विकली और विल यू बी एबल टू डू इट ऑन योर ओन? ओवरव्यू, रिवाइज, क्विकली रिवाइज कराऊंगा. सारे जो कीवर्ड्स हैं सिर्फ उन पे ध्यान देंगे, वो ही सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, इसलिए उसको हाईलाइट करके आपको दिया गया था. ठीक है, क्विकली ओवरव्यू लेंगे और जल्दी जल्दी करेंगे. ठीक है. जर्नी फ्रॉम कॉलोनियल रूल टू कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेमोक्रेसी, इंडिया अचीव्ड इंडिपेंडेंस इन 1947. 1950 में हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनी थी एंड वी विल सब्सिक्वेंटली रीड इन द फ्यूचर पार्ट्स की व्हाट वाज दिस प्रोसेस फ्रॉम 1947 टू 50 में क्या क्या हुआ, कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली डिबेट्स, ये सब. sovereign, secular, inclusive republic governance बनाई थी. Now we call it as 2 major phases of the British rule. The first is company rule. What is company है? कंपनी के क्या मतलब है यहाँ पे? वेरी गुड, ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी. तो यहाँ पे 2 टाइप के रूल्स थे. पहला था कंपनी रूल, ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी. दूसरा था क्राउन रूल. अब हमने 1858 तक क्यों माना है इसको? पहला एक्ट हम मान लेते हैं रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट ऑफ 1773 पढ़ते हैं, तो 1773 से हमने स्टार्ट किया, बट 1858 तक क्यों है? कुछ हुआ था क्या 1858 में? नहीं, रिवोल्ट तो हुआ था, बट 1858 का में कोई एक्ट आया था क्या? वहां पे कुछ डिसाइड हुआ था क्या? गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1858 आया था, तो वहां पे क्या डिसाइड हुआ था कि हम कंपनी रूल को अबॉलिश कर देंगे. तो अबॉलिश्ड द ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी एंड टुक ओवर विद द ब्रिटिश क्राउन. That is why we say that 1773 to 1858 was the company rule, and then was the crown rule from 1858 till 1947, which is independence. All right, then quickly let's get started with the company rule. The regulating act of 1773 passed by the British Parliament to address सबसे मतलब पहले ना कंडीशंस देख लिया करो कि क्या कंडीशंस थी. कंडीशन ये थी कि वाइड स्प्रेड करप्शन हो रहा था और मिसमैनेजमेंट हो रहा था. कौन कर रहे थे करप्शन? कंपनी के लोग. पीपल ऑफ कंपनी वर इंडल्जिंग इन करप्शन एंड मिसमैनेजमेंट. हो क्या रहा था कि यहाँ से तो बहुत सारे टैक्सेस कलेक्ट होते थे, ठीक है, बहुत सारा रेवेन्यू जनरेट होता था, बट वो ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट तक नहीं पहुंच रहा था। तो बीच में ये लोग जो करेक्ट कर रहे थे वो करप्शन में इंडल्ज कर रहे थे. That is why we say that there was widespread corruption and mismanagement in the EIC. The company gained vast territories but struggled to govern them effectively. There was no effective governance. Good governance, effective governance, digital governance, ethical governance सब पड़ा हुआ है. First major British Parliamentary Act to regulate the East India Company administration in India. So what is the major milestone of it? That was the first ever British Parliamentary Act, an act passed by the British Parliament to regulate the EIC's administration in India. Before this, EIC was left free and there was no control over EIC. Okay. Key features क्या हैं? The British government gained control by requiring the Court of Directors on Indian Affairs. जो भी उनके कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स थे उनको रिपोर्ट करना पड़ता था ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट को नाउ. सो दैट्स द फर्स्ट साइन ऑफ रेगुलेशन. वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स हियर इज दैट द गवर्नर ऑफ बंगाल, तीन प्रोमिनेंट प्रोविंसेस होती थी. कौन कौन सी होती थी? कौन सी तीन प्रोमिनेंट प्रोविंसेस थी? जल्दी बताओ. बंगाल, बॉम्बे एंड मद्रास. तो अब इन तीन में से द गवर्नर ऑफ बंगाल वाज टाइटल्ड एज द गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल. ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. हु वाज इट? वॉरेन हेस्टिंग्स. अब हम तीन चीजें पढ़ेंगे, वो तीनों आपको बता देता हूं. HBO, एक चैनल आता था बचपन में. There was a channel that we used to watch when we were kids. HBO, cut O into half becomes C. Okay. H for Hastings, B for Bentinck, and C for Canning. First Governor General was changed to Governor General of Bengal. Then we had Governor General of India, and then we had Viceroy of India. So he was the first Viceroy. Bentinck was the first Governor General, and Hastings was the फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल. याद हो जाएगा ये? इसमें तो कुछ भी नहीं होगा. अब इसके बाद इस ट्रिक के बाद याद हो जाएगा या नहीं होगा? ठीक है. तो इसमें क्या रिपीट करने का यार? सॉर्टेड. तो अब तीनों का क्विकली से चैट बॉक्स में टाइप करेंगे. मैं पहला पूछूंगा, सब पहला टाइप करेंगे. हु वाज द फर्स्ट वाइसरॉय ऑफ इंडिया? लॉर्ड कैनिंग. हु वाज द फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल? वेरी गुड, हेस्टिंग्स. तीसरा है फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया, विलियम बेंटिक. वेरी गुड. जल्दी से रिवाइज कर लो. मैं वो स्लाइड खोल लेता हूँ. नोट डाउन करना है तो नोट डाउन कर लो, फिर हम आगे मूव करेंगे. वेरी गुड. गुड जॉब प्रज्ञा. सॉर्टेड. चलो वापस चलते हैं. विल मूव टू डॉक्यूमेंट. वी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट द पिट्स इन द रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट ऑफ 1773. Governor General became Governor of Bengal became the Governor General of Bengal. He was assisted by a 4-member. All of this is okay. All of this is also okay. Okay. This is very important because the background was corruption and mismanagement. So we came out with this act, and this act said that the servants of the company were banned from private trade or accepting gifts or bribes. अब ये बताओ गिफ्ट्स को क्यों बंद किया? Why would you ban gifts before you sleep today? मतलब अगर आप शाम को 6 बजे ही सो जाओ तो मैं प्रॉमिस नहीं कर सकता, but usual before time of sleeping 100% I'll upload the full polity book. I have tried to incorporate everything. So yesterday you guys gave me a doctrines in it. डॉक्ट्रिन चाहिए आपको क्या? जैसे मैंने डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ फेथ एंड सब्सटेंस समझाया था कल. डू यू गाइस वांट डॉक्ट्रिन्स? यस. सो आई हैव ट्राइड टू मेक इट एज कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एज पॉसिबल. आई asked my content team to include this. That is why we were taking some time, right? So they have included this also. I am getting the final this thing formatting done. I have also gotten it reviewed, and you will get everything. Although the number of pages will increase, they have also increased. The previous PDF that I got was 300 odd pages. I've gotten it increased to around 450 plus pages now, but this is all because of the additional things that I asked them to add, and I think that was absolutely necessary. So this will be a one-stop solution for polity. Highlight मैं class से पहले करता हूँ, तो highlighted PDF तो नहीं मिल पाएगी. You will get it every day before class because I do that highlighting when I study for the class, right? Yes. Judgment is also included. All right. Sorted. So we were discussing about how company servants are stopped. Also, another important feature is establishment of Supreme Court of Justice at Calcutta. Because the act came in 1773, we are talking about Calcutta being the most important because of Bengal, and then the Supreme Court was established at Calcutta. This is also important. Sir Elijah Impey was the first Chief Justice of that court, Supreme Court of Justice. Okay, I have answered this 100 number of times that the group timings will be in circulation once we form the subgroups. Each subgroup will have a different sub timings so that I can equally participate in each subgroup. That is why we do not have timings now. Sir Elijah Impey was the first Chief Justice, and this is majorly about the Regulating Act of 1773. I don't think you need to read the drawbacks. The significance is the first British attempt to control and regulate the East India companies was in the Act of 1773 and the beginning of the centralized administration in India. Please note that this is very important because from here centralization of power started. अगर कोई भी बहुत ही अच्छा एस्पिरेंट है जिसने पढ़ा होगा तो मेरे को बताओ, पहला एक्ट जिसमें डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन स्टार्ट हुई थी, पहला एक्ट जिसमें डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन स्टार्ट हुई थी, कोई याद करके नहीं आया। आई थिंक मृणाल ने आंसर किया बस सही। बहुत ही बुरा हाल है यार। मतलब एक चीज आपको बोला था कि लर्न करके आना, मैं क्लास में उसको बहुत जल्दी जल्दी कराऊंगा, पूरा रटना था आपको। ये मैक्सिमम 2 घंटे का काम था, आप लोगों ने वो भी नहीं किया। इट्स वेरी डिसअपॉइंटिंग फॉर मी एज अ टीचर हियर। एनीवे, let's move on to the amending act of 1781. this is not important, just know कि 1773 और 1784 के बीच में 1781 आया था जिसको एक्ट ऑफ सेटलमेंट बोलते थे। just read the features once and then you're sorted. let's move on to the Pitt's India Act of 1784. this is an important act. why? because this talked about the concept of dual government. what was dual governance? sorry, not government but governance. What was the dual governance here? We separated the company's commercial as well as political functions. There were two things. First was court of directors and the second was, very good, board of control. अब मुझे बताओ कि बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल कमर्शियल करता था या पॉलिटिकल करता था? पॉलिटिकल करता था। वेरी गुड। सो बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल वाज रिस्पांसिबल फॉर पॉलिटिकल फंक्शंस, कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स वाज रिस्पांसिबल फॉर कमर्शियल फंक्शंस। कैसे याद करेंगे? सी फॉर कमर्शियल एंड सी फॉर कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। सो कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स रिस्पांसिबल फॉर कमर्शियल फंक्शंस एंड बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स रिस्पांसिबल फॉर political functions. Madras and Bombay presidencies were made fully subordinate to Bengal in a lot of matters such as war, revenue, and diplomacy. So that is why you had the supremacy of Governor General of Bengal now. And this is the first time that company territories are now known as British possessions in India, because it started centralization, you had started control. So in Pitt's India Act of 1784, you see the territories being known as British possessions in India. Dual control मैंने ऊपर समझा दिया, ये सारी उसकी चीजें हैं समझाने की। Any doubts with this? Otherwise, we move on to the Charter Act of 1793. Again, 1793 is not that important. Just know कि 1784 के Pitt's India Act और Charter Act of 1813 के बीच में Charter Act of 1793 आया था। अब ये Charter Acts क्या है? ये हर 20 years में आएंगे। Every 20 years, okay? So you have the Charter Act of 1793, and then the next Charter Act will be of 1813. And then the next Charter Act will be of 1833. ऐसे चलता रहेगा। Charter Act of 1813 is important. Here, what happened was he ended the company's trade monopoly. अब यहाँ पे इनका काम ट्रेड ही था, उसकी भी मोनोपोली को खत्म कर दिया। But there were two monopolies that he did not end. Those were trade in tea and second, trade with China. These were the two things that we did not end. Apart from that, the monopoly मतलब कि वो अकेले ही ट्रेड कर सकता था पहले, और कोई ट्रेड ही नहीं कर सकता था, उसको रोक दिया। This is also very very important. Under the Charter Act of 1813, we allowed Christian missionaries to enter India for religious as well as educational purposes. Do you know any keyword for this? What is this word called? Allowed Christian missionaries to enter India for religious and educational purposes. इसको क्या कहते हैं? Proselytization. ठीक है, ये याद कर लेंगे, इंपॉर्टेंट है काफी। 1813 में आया। Any doubts? All right. Okay. So I was saying that this concept of allowing Christian missionaries to enter India for religious and educational purposes is known as proselytization. Thank you, Priyanshu. All right. Let's move on to the Charter Act of 1833. इसकी कंडीशंस क्या थी? यहाँ पे लेजे फेयर और फ्री ट्रेड, हमने ऊपर एंडेड ट्रेड मोनोपोली करा था, तो अलग अलग लोगों को बुलाना था। तो लेजे फेयर जो फ्री इकोनॉमी होती थी, हमने पढ़ा भी था पिछली क्लासेस में, उसमें क्या होता है? फ्री ट्रेड ही होगी। तो फ्री ट्रेड और लेजे फेयर स्टार्टेड टू गेन इंपॉर्टेंस अराउंड 1833 एज वेल। इसमें क्या क्या हुआ? सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड ऑफ कमर्शियल रोल ऑफ कंपनी। कौन सा एक्ट है? चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833। एंड ऑफ द कमर्शियल रोल ऑफ कंपनी। कमर्शियल रोल कौन संभाल रहा था? बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल या कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स? अभी पढ़ाया था, सी से सी याद करो, कमर्शियल एंड कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। आप लोग बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल कैसे टाइप कर पा रहे हो? क्या इशू आ रहा है गाइस? ये तो बहुत ही सिंपल, मतलब ये तो 3rd क्लास का बच्चा भी याद रख सकता है, पर उसको बोलो तो क्या इशू आ रहा है? कोई इशू आ रहा है तो प्लीज टाइप करो, है ना? मैं वेट कर लेता हूँ 1 मिनट, प्लीज समझा दो मेरे को कैसे बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल टाइप किया आप लोगों ने। यहाँ पे इंडियन टेरिटरीज टू बी हेल्ड इन ट्रस्ट फॉर हिज मैजेस्टी, मतलब आप बोलने लग गए कि जो टेरिटरीज होंगी वो ट्रस्ट पे होंगी, ट्रस्टीशिप मॉडल होगा। मैजेस्टी कौन थे? क्वीन या किंग ऑफ इंग्लैंड, जहाँ पे मोनार्की थी। एनीवे, अब ये बताओ फर्स्ट टाइम ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस कहाँ पे वर्ड आया था? स्टार्टिंग में बोला ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस है, उसके बाद बोलने लगे ट्रस्ट फॉर हिज मैजेस्टी, ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस। एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिफॉर्म में क्या किया हमने? सबसे पहली बार कौन से एक्ट में बनाया उनको? चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833 में द गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ बंगाल वाज नाउ नोन एज द गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया विद फुल सिविल एंड मिलिट्री अथॉरिटी, एंड हु वाज द फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया? लॉर्ड विलियम बेंटिक। ये कौन से एक्ट में बनाया था? श्योर। यहाँ पे कमर्शियल रोल एंड हो गया। कमर्शियल रोल कौन करते थे? कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। यहाँ पे His Majesty Governor General became here, first Governor General कौन थे ये भी आपने डिस्कस कर लिया. We are discussing about the Charter Act of 1833, which is a very important act. अब सबसे पहली बार एक लॉ मेंबर को भी ऐड किया गया गवर्नर जनरल की जो काउंसिल होती थी. अभी तक एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल ही है, बाद में लेजिस्लेटिव और एग्जीक्यूटिव सेपरेट होगी. वो भी एक्ट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. You should have remembered the act where the legislative and the executive got separated in the Governor General's Council, but we're talking about the Executive Council for now only. And there was a law member that was added to the Governor General's Executive Council, and that first law member was Lord Macaulay. Here, आप ऐसे भी याद कर सकते हो, because a law member was added, you can remember it like this, that laws were now known as acts. Before this, laws were called as regulations. So which act allowed laws to be now known as acts? It was the Charter Act of 1833. Very good. Now, I also want any one volunteer, या फिर आप सभी बनाना कि सबको जरूरत है, and then I'll pick up the best notes in the whenever I open the chat section. All the short notes of the acts and whatever we are discussing in the class, सिर्फ वही जाएगा short notes. जैसे 1833 अगर आपको डिस्कस करना है, so first point would be you title it as 1833 conditions, laissez-faire and free trade. Point number 1, end of commercial role, court of directors gone. Point number 2, Governor General of Bengal became Governor General of India. First Governor General was William Bentinck. Point number 3, a law member was added, सिर्फ एक law member, executive council and Lord Macaulay. That's it. Point number 4, laws are now known as acts. That's it. So ऐसे short notes बनाने, I want all of you to make these short notes today when you go back home, and then I will open the group and you will send your short notes on at least this. Short notes for historical underpinnings, okay? And then I'll select the best notes and that can be the reference notes for everybody. इसके बाद आता है Charter Act of 1853. हर कितने साल बाद आ रहा था? कितने साल के इंटरवल पे आ रहे हैं एवरी चार्टर एक्ट? प्रज्वल, आई विल ओपन द ग्रुप, यू कैन शेयर, ओके, एंड देन आई विल हैव अ लुक एट देम. वेरी गुड. हर तो 1813 आया, फिर 33 आया, अब 53 आ रहे हैं. 53 में सबसे पहली बार आई वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट, सबसे पहली बार लॉ मेंबर कहां ऐड हुआ था? एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल में. कब हुआ था? 1833 में. After 1833 you have 1853, and for the first time in 1853 you have the separation of legislative as well as executive functions of the Governor General's Council. Prior to that you only had executive council, right? Because they were primarily performing executive functions. For the first time they relied on the power of separation of power, and the separation of power was a concept given by which political thinker? Very good, Montesquieu. Okay, so the first time under the Charter Act of 1853 we did this. Then we also created, because we are separating the legislative functions from the executive functions now, so we also created a new Indian Legislative Council. This had parliamentary procedures. Also, for the first time, you opened civil service recruitments to Indians. This happened in 1853. The idea was started in 1833. The idea to have an open examination was 1833, but it was implemented in 1853. Okay. Macaulay Committee. Who was Macaulay? The first law member. Here you also have legislative and executive councils was clearly separated, of course, because you had the separation of functions for the first time. Now, because you also established a legislative council, so the legislative council had how many members? Here it was 12. It included the Governor General, Commander-in-Chief. So these were 2, and then 4 of already of his council, and then 6 were legislative councillors. For the first time, local representation was introduced. Of course, because you're coming out with the legislative council for the first time, you also had local representation. And who all were the legislative members appointed by the provincial governments of Madras, Bombay, Bengal, and Agra? Madras, Bombay, Bengal, and Agra had sent the local representation. We're talking about which Charter Act? Of 1853. With this, we come to an end of the East India Company Rule. This was known as the Company Rule from 1858 because of the revolt of 1857. 1857 revolt is also known as the first war of independence. We abolished the East India Company and we started with the Crown Rule. Any doubts with this? ठीक है, फिर 2-3 क्वेश्चंस पूछ लेता हूँ. कौन से एक्ट में लॉज को एक्ट कहने लग गए थे? पहले उनको रेगुलेशंस कहते थे, अब उनको हम एक्ट कहने लग गए थे. कौन सा एक्ट था ये? वेरी गुड, 1833. पहली बार लॉ मेंबर को एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल में गवर्नर जनरल कब इंक्लूड किया गया था और उनका क्या नाम था? Who was the first law member who was incorporated and when was that done in the Governor General's Executive Council? Macaulay, 1833. Very good. When did we start calling the Indian territory as British possessions? Pitt India Acts of 1784. ठीक है. When did we have the first Governor General of Bengal and who was the which act and when? For which act and who? ठीक है. Very good. तो अब बताओ, who was the first Governor General of India? एंड व्हेन? बेंटिक 1833। चलो अब मेरे को बताओ, एक हमने कीवर्ड पढ़ा था क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज के लिए, तो मेरे को बताओ ईयर और वो कीवर्ड क्या था। क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज जब रिलीजियस और एजुकेशन पर्पस के लिए मैंने अलाउ कर दिया था, तो कब किया गया था और वो कीवर्ड क्या था? वेरी गुड, प्रोसेलिटाइजेशन 1813। 1813 में दो इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें थी, एक तो प्रोसेलिटाइजेशन और दूसरा एंडेड मोनोपोली एक्स। नो 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 नो, दिस इज द प्रॉब्लम। समबडी रोट एंड ऑफ ट्रेड विद चाइना एंड टी, नहीं, एंड ऑफ ऑल ट्रेड्स एक्सेप्ट ट्रेड विद चाइना एंड ट्रेड इन टी। Please learn this. This is very important. We ended the monopoly of trade except the monopoly in trade with China and trade in tea. Okay? Okay. When was the Indian Legislative Council introduced? Indian Legislative Council, when was it introduced? Okay. 1853. तो सबसे पहले इंडियन लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल जो थी उसकी सेंट्रल लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल में कितने मेंबर्स थे? हाउ मेनी मेंबर्स वर देयर इन द सेंट्रल लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल? 12. वेरी गुड, ये बहुत ही टफ था बट वेरी गुड, गुड जॉब। और कुछ बचा है? इफ देयर इज एनीथिंग लेफ्ट यू कैन पोस्ट इट डाउन इन द कमेंट बॉक्स। आई विल आस्क द क्वेश्चन टू एवरीबॉडी। एनी क्वेश्चन, कोई भी पॉइंट याद आ रहा हो, कीवर्ड याद आ रहा हो, रिवाइज करना हो, टेल मी। एक तो मेरे को याद आ रहा है, यस शिखर, यस, वेरी गुड रमेश, दिस इज द पॉइंट। व्हेन वाज सिविल सर्विसेज ओपन फॉर ऑल? ओपन रिक्रूटमेंट फॉर सिविल सर्विसेज, व्हेन डिड इट हैपन? अंडर द चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1853 इन द ईयर 1854। वेरी गुड। एनीथिंग एल्स लेफ्ट? Otherwise, we'll quickly move on to the crown rule then. Trust for His Majesty कब आया था? The term trust for His Majesty, when did this come? 1833. Concept of dual government कब आया था? Dual governance? 1784. Commercial and political functions. Who did commercial and who did political? Very good. कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स वाज कमर्शियल, बोर्ड ऑफ कंट्रोल वाज पॉलिटिकल। कोर्ट ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स को कब अबॉलिश किया था? एंडेड कमर्शियल फंक्शंस कब हुए थे? व्हेन डिड वी एंड द कमर्शियल फंक्शंस? 1833। ओके, व्हेन वाज द फर्स्ट लॉ मेंबर एडेड इन द एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल एंड हु वाज द फर्स्ट लॉ मेंबर? चलो, आई होप we have revised it enough number of times, given it a lot of time so that you can easily remember things for the first few acts now, which is still the company rule. Any doubts, any concerns, anything you think that you will not be able to remember, please let me know. I will repeat it so many number of times in the class that you will automatically remember it. किसी को भी ऐसा लगता है कि कोई भी एक पॉइंट उसको याद नहीं हो रहा है, मेरे को बताओ। Any single point that you're not able to remember? कोई भी? Okay, sorted. 1833 Macaulay, you are not able to remember. Okay. This is the act of 1833. 1833. For the first time in 1833, a law member was added to the Governor General's Executive Council. The name of that law member was Lord Macaulay. 1833 law member Lord Macaulay. 4 बार repeat करो. 1833 law member Lord Macaulay. 1833 लॉ मेंबर लॉर्ड मैकॉले। किसका क्वेश्चन था जिसको याद नहीं हो रहा था? 1833 लॉ मेंबर लॉर्ड मैकॉले। बताओ भाई, याद हो गया अभी? 1833 लॉ मेंबर लॉर्ड मैकॉले। आपके साथ I have 255 students live in the class who are writing it in the chat box with you. I hope you will not forget it after this. 1833 law member Lord Macaulay. Even if you read all the comments, you will see that you will be able to remember. ठीक है. Before we proceed, now I have to. There are two options that we do the crown rule in a similar manner, wherein I am constantly asking questions and we did around the same for 40 minutes. Or do you want me to just go fast, revise the keywords, and you will learn it on your own? Quickly tell me so that then we can decide on whether we'll be able to do the PYQs today or not. Okay, I'll put a poll. एक poll डाल दो, पहले पे लिख दो similar, दूसरे पे लिख दो fast. The poll is visible. क्या रिजल्ट्स है? 10 और 11 बस। इतने कम लोगों ने कैसे वोट किया यार? मेरे को एक बात बताओ, ये आई थिंक देयर इज सम इशू विद द पोल ऑफ द प्लेटफॉर्म दैट यू आर यूजिंग. Do you all have access to Telegram while we take classes? If yes, then I'll post it on the Telegram channel only. और फिर मैं live class में उसी से chat लेकर discuss कर सकता हूँ. Do you guys have access to? ठीक है, sorted. अभी मैं Telegram पे डाल रहा हूँ, उधर बताओ मेरे को जल्दी से. I've posted the poll. Please check. Now I'm getting a lot of votes. Yes. Okay. ठीक है. I have around 75% with similar and 25% with fast. So I'll go in a similar pace. What we'll do is we'll take the PYQs. Anyway, tomorrow is a Saturday, then you have a holiday on Sunday, so we'll get 2 whole days to revise everything, and we'll take PYQs tomorrow then. ठीक है, we'll do PYQs कल. Sorted then. Let me just open the chat box once again. Sorted. नहीं चलो नहीं, ठीक है. No, there would not be any class on Sunday. एक दिन की तो छुट्टी दे दो भाई. ठीक है, डन है. Sorted. Then we'll quickly move to क्राउन रूल. वापस ऐसे थोड़ा समझा के चलूंगा. क्राउन रूल क्यों कहते हैं 1858 में? The important act passed after the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857, also known as the first war of independence. There are a lot of other names to it, but okay. It abolished the East India Company, and that is why from 1858 you do not have the company rule but the crown rule. What is crown? Crown of the monarch, who is the king or the queen of UK. India was to be governed in the name of Her Majesty, the Queen. That is why the Act of 1858 is also known as Queen's Proclamation. India was to be governed in the name of Her Majesty. The Governor General was now called the Viceroy, acting as the Crown's direct representative. The first Viceroy of the Indian territory was Lord Canning. A lot of us were asking the difference between Viceroy and Governor General. I did not janbooch ke answer that, because anything that we cover later will not be answered first. And you should not have that habit of constantly nudging the teacher in the chat box of explaining things that are yet to come. From 1858 onwards, Governor General of India was now called as Viceroy. What was Viceroy? The direct representative of the crown. But there's a technical legality behind it. What is that legality? That for all the territories, there were 2 kinds of territories. One was British controlled, and the other were provincials. Provinces that were led by rajas. ये तो समझ में आता है? Yes or no? There were 2 kinds of territories. Do we understand this much? Yes, the princely states. Yes, okay. So and the word was Viceroy. So Canning was Viceroy. But whenever he was acting on British controlled territory, he was the Governor General of India. But whenever he was talking to provinces, he assumed the role of a Viceroy. Why? Because Viceroy was the direct representative of crown. And here, though, he was his head of his own territory, so Governor General of India. But still, this is a technical difference. But in common knowledge and common parlance and common talks, we call him the Viceroy. So from the Act of 1858 onwards, the Governor General of India was now known as the Viceroy of. Any doubts? So first important point of Act of 1858 was that it abolished East India Company, and second is that the territory was governed in the name of Her Majesty. The Governor General now known as the Governor General of Viceroy of India, and the first Viceroy was Lord Canning. The Board of Control and Court of Directors are abolished and replaced by the Secretary of State for India. This is another important office that was introduced, because you know that the Queen's Proclamation promised good governance for the people of India. अब बताओ मेरे को कि गुड गवर्नेंस उसने प्रॉमिस क्यों करी थी? क्वींस प्रोक्लेमेशन ने गुड गवर्नेंस क्यों प्रॉमिस करी थी? पीयूष, बिकॉज वी abolished the East India Company, therefore we also abolished the board of directors and board of control and the court of directors. The act came out so that there were no revolts like the revolt of 1857 happening again in the future. That is why good governance was promised, and that is why Queen took all of the matters in her own name, and that is why in the name of Her Majesty. We also introduced a new office saying that now a Secretary of State who sits in the British Parliament will be directly responsible for India. British Parliament में एक आदमी था, उसको directly ही appoint कर दिया Secretary of State for India, and he was responsible for all the matters relating to India. The Secretary of State was also advised by a council, which was a 15-membered India Council. India Council. As a British cabinet minister, British का cabinet minister को appoint किया. The secretary sat in parliament and was ultimately responsible for it, with final authority over India resting with the parliament. Now, because Queen assumed all powers relating to India, so final decision authority for anything within India would be with the British Parliament, and that British Parliament had a representative known as the Secretary of State, who was a cabinet minister directly responsible for India. Okay, so this is about the Charter Act, the Government of India Act of 1858. Also, you see, इससे पहले सारे charter, इसके बाद Government of India Act. क्यों? Because now the Government of India was assumed by Queen herself. So Government of India, the act for the good governance of. Any doubts? ठीक. No, Pragya, you cannot say that. ठीक. Let's move the Indian Councils Act of 1861. I'm giving you a mnemonic to remember. PODI. Podi. Podi idli है, घी पोड़ी होता है. There's some masala in the South Indian dishes. घी पोड़ी, पोड़ी idli. टेस्टी सा लगता है थोड़ा. किसी ने खाया हुआ है? Very good. तो पोड़ी याद करेंगे. P for portfolio. पोर्टफोलियो क्या है? रिकॉग्नाइज द पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम। इंट्रोड्यूस इससे पहले ही हो गया था, इंट्रोड्यूस 1859 में ही लॉर्ड कैनिंग के अंडर हो गया था वो, बट द फर्स्ट ऑफिशियल रिकॉग्निशन फॉर द पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम केम इन विद इंडियन काउंसिल एक्ट ऑफ 1861। व्हाट वाज द पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम? अलग अलग मिनिस्ट्रीज में डिवीजन ऑफ वर्क एंड स्पेशलाइजेशन, सो मिनिस्टर ऑफ हेल्थ, मिनिस्टर ऑफ एजुकेशन, so all of these were the portfolios, departments, right? So recognize the portfolio system, assigning council members to head specific departments with decision making powers. Departmentalization. So first P was portfolio. Second O is ordinances. Ordinances का है? Authorize the viceroy to issue ordinances without the legislative council's approval during emergencies, which is valid for 6 months. This 6 months is also important. मैंने पता नहीं क्यों नहीं highlight किया, but इसको कर लेना. So now, under the Indian Councils Act of 1861, you also had the provision that the viceroy could issue ordinances. Ordinances क्या होते हैं? Those acts which have the same power as a law. आपने एक ऐसी चीज पास करी as the viceroy which has the same power as a law, but वो अभी पार्लियामेंट ने अप्रूव नहीं किया है. 6 महीने तक विदाउट पार्लियामेंट्स अप्रूवल इट कैन वर्क. क्या आज भी हम ऐसा कुछ ऑब्जर्व करते हैं हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में? कैन द प्रेसिडेंट इशू ऑर्डिनेंसेस? So you see how we have drawn parallels from 1861 as on today. Okay. If president can issue ordinances, what is the article? Article for the president. Very good. 1, 2, 3. अभी तक मैंने आपको दो चीजें याद कराई हैं. एक तो 74 एंड 75 और रूल ऑफ 89 इसमें ऐड कर दो तो स्टेट का बन जाएगा. कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम का. आर्टिकल 123 याद करेंगे, प्रेसिडेंट्स ऑर्डिनेंस से रिलेटेड है. 1, 2, 3. चलो वापस खोल देते हैं. क्या क्या करा चुका हूं अब तक? 74 एंड 75. सबसे पहले तो आर्टिकल 1 भी पढ़ा दिया था. इंडिया दैट इज भारत हेल्प यूनियन ऑफ स्टेट्स. आर्टिकल 74 एंड 75 प्लस 89 ऐड कर देते थे हम इसमें. ठीक है, ये दूसरा याद करा दिया. तीसरा आपको एक बार इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया का आर्टिकल भी याद कराया था मैंने. क्या इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया का आर्टिकल? 324. अभी मैंने प्रेसिडेंट का याद कराया. प्रेसिडेंट ऑर्डिनेंसेस आर्टिकल इज 1, 2, 3. अब प्रेसिडेंट का स्टेट काउंटर पार्ट कौन होता है? गवर्नर. बट यहाँ पे 89 नहीं ऐड करके याद करेंगे गवर्नर्स ऑर्डिनेंसेस 213. अब देखो 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 एंड 2, 3, 4 ऐसे याद करेंगे इसको. सो इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया 324, प्रेसिडेंट ऑर्डिनेंस 1, 2, 3, गवर्नर्स ऑर्डिनेंसेस 213, 74, 75 यू ऑलरेडी नो, प्लस 89 एंड देन आर्टिकल 1. वापस पूछ लेता हूं जल्दी से. गवर्नर्स ऑर्डिनेंस, गवर्नर्स ऑर्डिनेंस, प्रेसिडेंट्स ऑर्डिनेंस, वेरी गुड, वेरी गुड. इलेक्शन कमीशन, very good. India that is Bharat shall be a union of states. Difference between union and federation, very good, very good. Last क्या था? Collective responsibility का exact article बताएंगे. Exact article. Collective responsibility का exact article. जो सबसे पहले exact article बताएगा उसको मैं टॉफी दूं. टॉफी. Very good. ये गया 75-3. मीनाक्षी. Meenakshi is the first person. Very good, Meenakshi. Very proud of you. चलो Meenakshi, if you come to the offline meet, I'll treat you. Okay? Sorted. Where are you from, Meenakshi? Very good, Meenakshi. Then I'll see you in the offline meet and then a treat on my side. याद दिला देना मेरे को, शर्माना. चलो खैर, तो ये सारा हो गया जी. आर्टिकल्स हो गए. वी विल डिस्कसिंग अबाउट यस. ओके. पोडी. पी फॉर पोर्टफोलियो, ओ फॉर ऑर्डिनेंसेस. अब तक ये दो चीजें हम कर चुके हैं. थर्ड डी मींस डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन. बहुत सारे चैट बॉक्स में बार बार क्वेश्चन आ रहा था कि डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन कब स्टार्ट हुआ था. व्हेन डिड डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन स्टार्ट? And I did not answer this on purpose because we'll not run ahead of wherever we are teaching in the class. Okay. So decentralization started with the Act of Indian Councils Act of 1861. It was the beginning of the decentralization process. So centralization started from, centralization कब start हुई थी? End हुई इससे ऊपर and then decentralization का process starts. So portfolio, ordinances, decentralization. I is the inclusion of first time inclusion of Indians in the legislative council. Indians. So first point, allowed the viceroy to nominate Indians as non-official members of his expanded legislative council. Lord Canning nominated the Raja of Banaras, Maharaj of Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. We'll remember all these three names. Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. They were the first Indians to be nominated as non-official members in the legislative council. Official members, non-official members, ये सब क्या होता था आप रट लेना, मतलब पढ़ लेना खुद ही. वैसे समझाने में बहुत ही ईजी है कि इनके पास कम पावर्स होती थी, ये इलेक्ट मतलब ये इलेक्ट नहीं होते थे, सीधा नॉमिनेट होते थे, ऑल ऑफ दैट. बट स्टिल, सो वाइसरॉय नॉमिनेटेड Indians as non-official members, Raj of Banaras, Maharaja Patiala and Sir Dinkar Rao. Because we started with decentralization, And because in 1773 the powers of Bombay, the powers of Madras came to the governor of Bengal, so now you are so this was centralization, now you are moving towards decentralization again. So from Bengal you will give powers to Bombay, from Bengal you will give powers to Madras. So restored the legislative, अब ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, people मतलब restored powers नहीं है, legislative powers only, executive powers are still with the viceroy. So restored the legislative powers to the Bombay and Madras presidencies, reversing the centralizing trend started by the Regulating Act of 1773, further intensified by the Charter Act of 1833. This laid the foundation for provincial autonomy. What is provincial? Provinces such as Bombay and Madras. Autonomy मतलब उनकी खुद की powers. So legislative powers को हमने restore करना start कर दिया. ठीक है, बाकी तो सबको बता दिया, कुछ न्यू लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल, बंगाल नॉर्थ, NFWPS नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर प्रोविंस. कौन सा प्रोविंस होता था जो इंडिया का मैप है ऐसे, ये वाला एरिया पूरा नॉर्थ वेस्ट, अफगानिस्तान, पाकिस्तान, पूरा पंजाब, ये सब. ठीक है. Empower the poised to make rules etc etc, recognize the portfolio system. तो 1861 को कैसे याद रखेंगे? ओडी से. कोई इश्यूज? और डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन से डी, ओ से ऑर्डिनेंसेस, पी से पोर्टफोलियो, नाइन से इंडियन इंक्लूजन ऑफ इंडियंस. क्विकली बता दो कौन कौन से इंडियन इंक्लूड किए गए थे, कौन कौन से इंडियंस इंक्लूड किए गए थे जल्दी से. राजा ऑफ बनारस, महाराजा ऑफ पटियाला एंड सर दिनकर राव. ठीक है भाई, सॉर्टेड. 1861 थोड़ा सा इंपॉर्टेंट, अब हमने याद कर लिया. अब हम मूव करेंगे नेक्स्ट पे, व्हिच इज द इंडियन काउंसिल एक्ट ऑफ 1892. यहाँ पे क्या हुआ? इंक्रीज द नंबर ऑफ एडिशनल मेंबर्स. एडिशनल मतलब नॉन ऑफिशियल, जिनकी वोटिंग ज्यादा मेजॉरिटी वगैरह नहीं होती थी in central and provincial legislative council, keeping the majority intact. यहाँ पे 9 ex officio members आ गए, जिसमें से viceroy, 6 executive, commander in chief, 6 official additional members, 10 non-official members. Although that's not as important, but because it's an act, so I'm adding the numbers here. Also enabled governors to nominate members to provincial councils based on suggestions from district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, zamindar chambers, reflecting better decentralization and participation. Decentralization and participation से क्या याद आता है? गुड गवर्नेंस एक्ट फॉर गुड गवर्नेंस ऑफ इंडिया, इससे पहले ही आ गया था, तो अब उसी की लाइट्स में चीजें चल रही हैं. ठीक है. प्लान्शो इग्नू की फुल फॉर्म होती है इंदिरा गांधी नेशनल ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी. कहाँ लिखा है इग्नू? अच्छा इग्नू. ओ, this means that because a lot of materials vary, so we have picked up an official source of Indira Gandhi National Open University. This is a government document, government authenticated source, that there were 9 ex officio members. अलग अलग बुक्स में अलग अलग चीजों में अलग अलग नंबर ऑफ एक्स ऑफिशियो मेंबर्स लिखे हैं, तो यहाँ पे टीम ने इग्नू ऐड करा कि इग्नू के हिसाब से ये तो ऑफिशियल ये थे. और फंक्शंस में इनलार्ज करे थे 1892 में. अब क्या कर सकते थे हम? एनुअल बजट, यानी कि हमारी वर्ड में, हमारी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में भी वर्ड बजट मेंशन नहीं है, एनुअल फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट मेंशन्ड है. कौन सा आर्टिकल है, किसी को पता है? ऐसा भी करेंगे फिर, जो मैं क्लास में इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल्स बताऊंगा सब एक अलग नोटबुक या अलग लास्ट के पेजेस पे लिस्ट ऑफ आर्टिकल्स लिखते रहेंगे और उस पर ऐड करना शुरू करेंगे. एनुअल फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट, बजट नहीं कहते हम, बजट को एक्चुअल वर्ड है एनुअल फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. विच आर्टिकल इज इट? सब 112 कह रहे हैं. आप एक बार इस आर्टिकल को खोलकर पढ़ेंगे, अगर इसमें नहीं मिलेगा तो कौन सा आर्टिकल है वो फाइंड आउट करेंगे. 110 से 113 के बीच में ही है, और फिर हम अपनी नोटबुक्स में उसको ऐड कर लेंगे, लिस्ट ऑफ आर्टिकल्स में ऐड कर लेंगे. कहाँ गई हमारी लिस्ट ऑफ आर्टिकल्स? एनुअल फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट. प्रिपेयर करेंगे ना सब लिस्ट ऑफ आर्टिकल्स, या नहीं सिर्फ इंपॉर्टेंट लिखवाऊंगा उसमें? ठीक है. तो अब यहाँ पे क्या हुआ? 1892 में लार्जमेंट ऑफ फंक्शंस हो गए. यहाँ पे आप डिस्कस भी कर सकते थे एनुअल बजट को, बट चेंज नहीं कर सकते थे. यहाँ पे आप क्वेश्चंस पूछ सकते थे, बट सप्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चंस नहीं पूछ सकते थे. क्यों बताया गया? यू कुड आस्क क्वेश्चंस बट नॉट सप्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चंस, एंड यू कुड डिस्कस द बजट बट यू कुड नॉट ऑल्टर इट. When could you alter the budget and when could you ask supplementary questions to questions? It will be in the subsequent acts. Now, why is 1892 important? Because this act allowed limited indirect elections to fill some official seats, but the word election was never used. So this also becomes important question, that when was elections first time introduced without the word election, and then when was the term election first time used. We'll read this in the subsequent acts, but know that here indirect elections to some limited extent were happening. So the concept of election is there, but the word election was not there until 1892. Okay, so the first time indirect elections happened in 1892. Short notes में इस लाइन को बहुत इंपॉर्टेंटली ऐड करेंगे. 1892 indirect elections first time, but the word elections was not there. याद है ना शॉर्ट नोट्स बनाने? सप्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चंस होते हैं कि आपने पहले क्वेश्चन पूछा एक बजट पे, फिर उनका आंसर आ गया, बट अब आपको रिपीटल क्वेश्चन पूछना है, आंसर पे भी वापस क्वेश्चन पूछना. सो दैट्स सप्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चंस. चलो, नेक्स्ट इज द इंडियन काउंसिल एक्ट ऑफ 1909. सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है ये, इसको बोलते थे मॉर्ले मिंटो रिफॉर्म्स. क्यों बोलते थे? मॉर्ले वाज द नेम ऑफ सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट फॉर इंडिया. जो सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट फॉर इंडिया कब आए थे? 1858 में. और ये थे मिंटो उस टाइम के वाइसरॉय. तो ऐसे ही नाम रखते थे, मॉर्ले मिंटो. अच्छा मेरे को बताओ, क्योंकि सबको मैंने होमवर्क दिया था, दैट्स व्हाई आई एम आस्किंग दिस क्वेश्चन. 1919 को क्या कहते थे? अगर बैठ नहीं रहे तो वो चेयर यहाँ रख दो. अगर नहीं बैठ रहे तो चेयर मेरे को दे दो. 1919 को क्या कहते थे? वेरी गुड. Montego Chelmsford. Montego was the Secretary of State and Chelmsford was the Viceroy. Okay, so this is how the naming happened. So 1909 was Morley Minto reforms. Who is known as the father of communalization या communalism in India? Father of communalism किसको कहते हैं? लॉर्ड मिंटो को. क्यों कहते हैं? Why is Lord Minto known as the father of communalization? Separate electorate. वेरी गुड. अब देख लो जल्दी से. 1909 के एक्ट में क्या हुआ था? पहली बार हमने बोला था कॉम्युनल रिप्रेजेंटेशन देंगे, सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट देंगे. सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट क्या होता है? व्हाट इज अ सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट? यू आल्सो हैव ओनली द पीपल ऑफ दैट कम्युनिटी बीइंग इलेक्टेड, या फिर मतलब जो इलेक्शंस के लिए खड़े होंगे और सिर्फ वो ही वोट करेंगे. दिस इज सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट. Okay, separate electorate means that in an electorate only those people will be able to contest elections that belong to a particular community for the which the separate electorate is reserved, and only people of those community will also vote. So जो खड़े हुए हैं इलेक्शन में वो भी मुस्लिम हैं और जो वोट कर रहे हैं वो भी सिर्फ मुस्लिम्स होंगे. This is separate electorates. So for the first time in the act introduced communal representation for Muslims through separate electorates, where Muslim members were elected only by Muslim voters, legalizing the concept of communism. That is why Lord Minto is also known as the father of communalism. So the Communal Act was Indian Council Act of 1909. It is also known as the Morley-Minto reforms. ठीक है. The act greatly increased the size of legislative councils. 16 से 60 हो गया था. This is an important point noted down in short notes. It kept an official majority but permitted a non-official majority in the provinces. सेंट्रल काउंसिल में तो ऑफिशियल मेजोरिटी रहेगी. ऑफिशियल कौन होते थे? यूजुअली ब्रिटिशर्स. और नॉन ऑफिशियल क्या होते थे? जो आप उस रीजन की भी रख सकते थे, बट तो उन नॉन ऑफिशियल मेजोरिटी को प्रोविंसेस में अलाउ कर दिया था. सो वी आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन अगेन एंड अगेन आफ्टर 1861. दिस इज आल्सो द फर्स्ट टाइम दैट इंडियंस वर इंक्लूडेड इन द एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल ऑफ द वाइसरॉय. This is for the first time that Indians were included in the executive council of viceroy. 1861 में हमने inclusions of Indian की बात करी थी, but किस में करी थी? In the legislative council. So because executive holds more powers than during British, so that came in later. Legislative council inclusion of Indians happened in 1861, but executive council inclusion of Indians happened in 1909. And who was included as the first? Okay, so I was talking about that the first time Indians were included in the legislative council back in 1861. However, in the executive council, for the first time, we had the inclusion of Indian in the form of S.P. Sinha, who became the first Indian law member in the Vice Executive Council. Satyendra Prasad Sinha, Dr. S.P. Sinha, and sorry, no, I don't know if he was Dr. or S.P. Sinha in the Act of 1909. This is a very, very important fact. Okay. Have talked about why it was a communal act. I have talked about the first this thing. We've also talked about the official majority, non-official, increasing legislative councils. Here, previously we did not use the word election, but here elections for open seats use the indirect system. Previously, you were asked to allow questions, but you were not allowed to ask supplementary questions. So you were also allowed to ask supplementary questions now, and you also had more budget-related resolutions, which means that you could have brought changes to the budget as well. Let's move on to the Act of 1919 now. Montego, Chelmsford. Montego, the Secretary of State, Chelmsford, the Viceroy. Executive Council, 6 members. So here in 1919, for the first time, you had equal number of Indians. Out of the 6 members, 3 were Indians, except the Commander-in-Chief, that was separate, right? But of course, because you were Indian, so you were appointed minor portfolios, not major like law and education. Major would be finance, major would be home, major would be defense, major would be international relations. In 1919, you also for the first time had a bicameral legislature and direct elections. Very, very important. Direct elections पहली बार कब आए? ठीक है. Bicameralism and direct elections in 1919. What is bicameralism? That you have 2 houses. पहले क्या इंडियन लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल ही थी बस. अब now you have 2 houses, The Council of States is the upper house, and the Legislative Assembly, which is the lower house. The communalism that was introduced in 1909 by providing separate electorate to Muslims. Now we had separate communal electorates to Sikhs, to Indian Christians, and to Anglo-Indians, and to Europeans. First was by Muslims to 1909, for Muslims in 1909. By 1919, we extended it to Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians, and Europeans. So 4 other separate electorates apart from Muslims. Anyway, so you're talking about the extension of communal electorates. First was Muslims, then Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, and Europeans. This is in 1919. Because you had bicameralism and direct elections introduced here, you also had 2 separate lists now, central list and provincial list. Where were the residual powers? This is very, very important. Governor General. The powers of residual powers were with Governor General or Viceroy. The power of Governor General was expanded. Now you could veto any bill. Ordinance कब कर सकता था governor? Viceroy. When could the Viceroy introduce ordinance? Now it's not the Viceroy, but the Governor General of that particular province could also veto any bill. Yes, I was asking when was the this thing? Ordinance? No, I'm not asking the article. Yes, 1861. Very good. In 1919, one of the most important things that ever happened, and is a very, very important question, was introduction of provincial diarchy. What is diarchy? That you, in provinces, you had 2 kinds of subject. One was transferred subject, one was reserved subject. Transferred subject means that the executive council will transfer the responsibility of administering those subjects to the legislative council. Whereas reserved subject means that these were the subjects that were concerned with the governor and his executive council without responsibility to the legislative council. So ये होती है diarchy. This diarchy was introduced in 1919, but only at the provincial level. तो 2 important चीजें हैं. 1919 में क्या हुआ था? सबसे पहले बाइकैमरलिज्म. ये बाइकैमरलिज्म स्टेट्स में थी या सेंटर में थी? Second, direct elections. Yes, where was this bicameralism? Center or provinces? Center. And third most important thing is diarchy. Where did diarchy happen? At center or provinces? Very good. Provinces. So bicameralism is center, but diarchy at the provinces. What is diarchy? You have 2 kinds of subjects now. Di matlab 2. So you have dual types of subjects. One is reserved and the other is transferred. Reserved subject means you kept it for the executive council and the governor himself, whereas transferred means you're now giving the power to legislative councils of the provinces. Isn't it obvious that reserved subjects should be the one which are very, very important or highly, and transferred would be the ones which are easily being able to do at the ground level? What do we call at the subjects which could be easily done at the ground level? At the ground level, what is that principle? Principle of, we discussed this in the concept of federalism. The principle of subsidiary, nahi subsidiarity. Good job. So these are the 3 important things. Now I'll just quickly run you through the list of subjects. This is also PYQ, जिसमें the question was reserved subjects था. यहाँ पे local governance था. This local self-government was an option, and the question was which of the following are reserved subjects. You eliminate local self-government because obviously it will be a transferred subject because it can be best performed at the ground level, and you would have arrived the answer. तो इससे मैं क्या सिखाना चाह रहा हूँ कि एक conceptual चीज याद रखेंगे कि transferred subjects were the subjects which were easily given to the people at the lower, but reserved were the important subjects. So you do not have to remember each and every list. You have to remember the concept and you will arrive at the right answer. By that concept we'll read. So was police and justice an important thing? Yes, that is why it was reserved. Was printing presses very important? You will read in modern history, Vernacular Press Act came out. Presses are very important because they can criticize the government. So reserved. Irrigation and land revenue. Anything about revenue would be very important. So reserved. Factories, reserved. Transferred concordancy, which were not giving you anything much, but it was the work for the work of people. For people, you do health, education, agriculture, local self-governance. All of this became transferred. So all I'm trying to explain was that you do not have to remember each and every subject, but know the ethos of what transferred and reserved subjects were, and you'll arrive with the answer. This is also UPSC PYQ, and उसमें local self-government answer में था reserved के, वो नहीं होता, इसको answer करो, eliminate करो, and you would arrive at the right answer. Okay. अब provincial budgets from central budget भी separate हो गए थे because we're talking about provincial diarchy also. Each province had a unicameral legislature. Bicameralism was at the center. So bicameralism at center, provincial diarchy at provinces, but at provinces you had a unicameral legislature. You also had the concept of direct elections here. अब क्या हुआ, सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट का ऑफिस कब आया था? 1858 में. अब हमने क्या कर दिया, ऑफिस ऑफ हाई कमिश्नर फॉर इंडिया इन लंदन was created in 1990. You also had a Central Public Service Commission in 1926. Central Public Service Commission. जैसे आज के डेट में यूनियन पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन है यूपीएससी, तो वही सेंट्रल पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन इन 1926 फॉर सिविल सर्विस इंप्रूवमेंट्स इन 1990. ठीक है, तो 1919 इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. उससे भी ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है 1935. 1935 is super important. We'll quickly read why. Because here the provincial diarchy was abolished. Provincial diarchy abolish करके कहीं पे और diarchy आई थी क्या? We now had diarchy at the center. Very important. So provincial autonomy थी, provincial autonomy, diarchy in provinces was abolished. Another very important feature was the creation of an all India federation. Also, although this is only a proposal, all India federation establish नहीं हो पाई थी. And this all India federation would have federal list, provincial list and concurrent list. That's something we've already discussed. And the concept of diarchy at the center. Residuary powers are vested in the viceroy. Another PYQ. The federation never materialized, but an all India federation was proposed. So ये याद रखेंगे. There was a proposal for an all India federation under 1935, but it was not ever materialized. मतलब वो implement नहीं हुआ था कभी भी. क्यों? क्योंकि princely states refused to join the all India federation. So it was never implemented. इसको इसी को तेज कर देना इधर है तो ठीक है. Yes, that was introduced at the center. Residuary powers of the viceroy. The federation never materialized. All India federation was there. Now, bicameralism was introduced at the center in 1919. You also have bicameralism legislature now in states or in provinces in 1935. The federal part of the 1935 never came into operation because princely states refused to join. Here you also see the concept of electorate now extending to scheduled castes, which is known as separate classes, women and workers as well. अब तक कौन कौन हो गया? मुस्लिम्स 1909. इधर 4 लोग थे, एंग्लो इंडियंस, इंडियन क्रिश्चियंस, यूरोपियंस एंड सिक्स in 1919. And now you have SCs, women workers in 1935. You also had an RBI, which is the Reserve Bank of India. You also have a Joint Public Service Commission now. Central Public Service Commission कब आई थी? 1919 में, क्योंकि 1926 में एस्टैब्लिश हुई थी, तो 1919 एक्ट के थ्रू हुई थी. Now 1935 के एक्ट के थ्रू you have a Joint Public Service Commission also for 2 or more states. And this concept also extends to Indian Constitution today. Joint Public Service Commission in 1930, and you also had a Federal Court in 1937. So the first Supreme Court was established where and in which year, and who was the first Chief Justice? हमने पढ़ा था अभी पार्ट 1 में. First Supreme Court, where by which act, where location is Kolkata, very good. Which act? 1773, very good. Who was the first Chief Justice? Sir Elijah Impey. On that note, you have a formal federal court being set up in 1937. Joint Public Service Commission, Federal Court, RBI, common representation, bicameralism at provinces, diarchy at the center, residuary powers the Viceroy, All India Federation. Okay, these are very important. 1935 Act. Also, this is the act which was also known as the Interim Constitution of India. Why? Because Indian Independence Act of 1947 में बोला गया था कि Constituent Assembly अपने acts बनाएंगी, अपनी constitutions बनाएंगी. जब तक वो बनाती हैं, the government will be run by Government of India Act of 1935, and this is why it's very important. You also had a direct question in mains on Government of India Act of 1935. इसके features को याद करके note down कर लेंगे. I'll repeat. 1935 provincial autonomy हो गई थी. We abolished the diarchy at provinces. We established the diarchy at the center. We also proposed an all India federation. We also proposed federalist list, provincial list, concurrent list, residuary powers with the viceroy. Federation never materialized. Diarchy was introduced at the center. Bicameralism was also introduced in provinces now. You also had communal representation extended to SCs, women and workers. You also had the establishment of an RBI, the provision for establishing joint public service commissions, the provision to establish a federal court in 1937. Interim constitution, mini constitution, yes. All of this is 1935, very, very important. I'll quickly take you to now being independent, the Indian Independence Act of 1947. 42nd Amendment को बोलते हैं वैसे मिनी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बट anyway, yes, Indian Independence of 1947. On 20th February 1947, the then British Prime Minister Attlee announced that British rule would end in India by 30th June 1948. क्योंकि बहुत सारी चीजें होगी, there were a lot of developments. We'll read this in the transfer of power when we read modern history in detail. But just know that British Prime Minister Attlee on 20th February 1947 declared that we'll give you grant independence by 30th June 1948. But during the course of happened, a lot of things happened, Muslim League, etc., etc. And then on 3rd June 1947, British stated that any constitution would not apply to unwilling regions. And then Lord Mountbatten came out with a partition plan, जिसकी वजह से Indian Independence Act 1947 आया. The Indian Independence Act 1947 ended the British rule in India and declared India as an independent sovereign nation. From 15th August 1947, ये nation की जगह dominion explain किया था. From 15th August 1947, divided India into dominions, India and Pakistan, each free to leave the British Commonwealth. Replaced the Viceroy with a Governor General in each domain. Viceroy was a representative of British Crown, but Governor General तो खुद को गवर्न करता था, तो उसको रिप्लेस करके गवर्नर जनरल दे दिया फॉर ईच डोमिनियन. अपॉइंट किसने किया था? ब्रिटिश किंग ने किया था, क्योंकि ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर करनी थी. इट वाज अपॉइंटेड बाय द ब्रिटिश किंग बिकॉज़ यू नीडेड ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर, बट इट वाज एडवाइज्ड बाय द decision of the cabinet alone. Give both the constituent assemblies the power to frame and adopt their own constitutions and repeal British laws. Constituent assemblies were framed, and we'll read about this constituent assembly. When did it start? When did it end? What all did it do? What are the members in the part B? So constituent assembly के बारे में पढ़ेंगे. It also removed the title of Emperor of India. It ended British paramountcy. It allowed princeless states to choose between joining India, Pakistan, even remaining independent. इसलिए इसको Balkans plan भी बोलते थे. Balkanization क्या होती है? यूरोप में बहुत सारी कंट्रीज छोटे छोटे में डिवाइड हो गई थी. Similarly here, because they allowed either to join India, Pakistan, or even remain independent, this was a problem that we encountered, that there were a lot of princely states that wanted to stay independent. Then you had Junagadh, Kashmir, Hyderabad Operation Polo, a lot of things coming into when we study post-independence Indian history for mains. Who was the pioneer who integrated all the princely states in India? किसको क्रेडिट दिया जाता है? किनको क्रेडिट दिया जाता है? सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल. सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल को सरदार टाइटल कहाँ पे मिला था? We have discussed this in the class. Where was the title of Sardar given to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel? Bardoli Satyagraha. Very good. So it was because of this provision that they were allowed to stay independent as well that we encountered a lot of problems. It continued with the Government of India in 1935 as an interim constitution until the Constituent Assembly passed or framed the new constitution. The Indian Independence Act of 1947 marked the legal end of British rule in India and the birth of two sovereign nations, India and Pakistan. Sovereignty क्या होती है? Free from any external interference. They can run their own affairs from inside. अच्छा एक बात बताओ, is India sovereign? India is sovereign, okay, which means that no external action can govern us, right? But there are a lot of times when UN says something and we have to do it necessarily. Then how are we sovereign? Yes, because we agreed on those terms ourselves. We have ratified. आपको पता है सबसे पहले कोई भी एक इंटरनेशनल अगर ट्रीटी होती है या डॉक्यूमेंट होता है, सबसे पहले उसको कंट्री खुद ही साइन करती है, सिग्नेटरी बनती है. सिग्नेटरी का मतलब होता है we will consider we are agreeing with the principles of the document and we'll go back home, discuss it with our country and let you know if you want to be a member of this treaty or not, right? So this is signatory, that we agree with the principles, but the principles become binding on you, that you have to obey them when you ratify the treaty. So this is the process of ratification. तो पहले signatory होता है, फिर ratification होता है. अब signatory भी आप अपनी मर्जी से करते हो और ratification भी आप अपनी मर्जी से करते हो. You will never be an automatic ratifier of any treaty. UN will request you, and then on your own will you will ratify a particular treaty that I will obey with this principle. So because you have done it on your own will, अपनी मर्जी से आपने बोला है कि मैं पावर आपको देता हूं, तो आप sovereign तो हो ही, because you were first asked if you want to do it or not. Does this do you all understand this? Let's now quickly read the interim government of 1946. Jawaharlal Nehru was the Vice President of the Executive Council. External Affairs, Commonwealth Relations, Vallabhbhai Patel, Home Minister. Information Broadcasting, Home is very important because princely states. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Agriculture. Who was Dr. Rajendra Prasad? What was his accomplishment? Why do we know Dr. Rajendra Prasad? First President of India. Sardar Baldev Singh, Defense Minister. Dr. John Mathai, Industries. C. Rajagopalachari, Education and Arts. C. Rajagopalachari is also important. Baba, who works mines and power. Homi Jahangir Baba was related to nuclear power only. Jagjeevan Ram, Labour. Asaf Ali, Railway. Liaquat Ali Khan, Finance. Ibrahim Ismail Chudungar, Commerce. Abdul Rab Nishtar, Post and Air. Gasanvar Ali Khan, Health. Jogendra Nath Mandal, Law. क्या क्या याद रखना है इसमें? जवाहरलाल नेहरू, वल्लभ भाई पटेल, डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद, सी राजागोपालाचारी, and I think that's it. Okay. Now, the members of the interim government were members of the Viceroy's Executive Council. Interim government में कौन-कौन लोग थे? जो all the members of the Viceroy's Executive Council. Head of the council कौन था? Head of the council was still Viceroy, but Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of our country, was designated as the Vice President of the Council. So Indian side से कौन head कर रहा था? Dr. Jawaharlal Nehru. He was the Vice President of the Executive Council. The President was still the Viceroy, but still. So Indian side, Jawaharlal Nehru. First cabinet, Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister. Even the external affairs and the commonwealth relations, scientific research. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, home. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, food and agriculture. Then Sardar Baldev Singh, defense. R. K. Shanmugam Chetty, finance. First three are absolutely important. Then all of this you can have a look at and read. Dr. B. R. Ambedkar also becomes important because he was a law, and also education is important. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Dr. S. P. Mukherjee is also an important personality, although the ministry is not as important, but the personality is important. With this, we come to an end of the part A of your polity, which was the conceptual clarity. Before we do that, I will ask you a couple of questions for the next 15 odd minutes, and then we'll see how things go. Act of Good Governance किसको कहते हैं? चलो अब आप लोग क्वेश्चंस या कीवर्ड्स टाइप करो, उसमें से एक पिकअप करके मैं क्लास से क्वेश्चन पूछूंगा, देन क्लास विल आंसर. क्वींस प्रोक्लेमेशन भी 1858 को बोलते हैं. So these are the all acts that you study for history. Okay, I have to explain signatory and ratification, Pragya. I will do that. Whenever there is any international treaty, any member country has two options. You can either be a signatory, then ratification, and third, of course, if you do not do both, then you are a non-member. तो मान लो कि यूनिवर्सल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स करके एक डॉक्यूमेंट आया यूडीएचआर. ये डॉक्यूमेंट इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ, इसमें बहुत सारे यूनिवर्सल ह्यूमन राइट्स के प्रिंसिपल्स थे, एंड इंडिया लुक्ड एट दैट डॉक्यूमेंट. नाउ द मेंबर डेलीगेशन सिटिंग of India representing in the UN body will say that I agree with all the principles in the document and I find them very nice, and we hope that we will be able to look at have it. So India agrees with the principles in the document. So you become a signatory to the document. Merely by agreeing, you do not mean that you will implement everything, right? So it's a signatory. So you become a signatory to the document. You come back home, you discuss it with your Prime Minister, External Affairs Minister, you discuss it in your Parliament, and you say that we will, if we become a ratifier, we will obey with each principle of UDHR. फिर डॉक्यूमेंट को अच्छे से पढ़ते हैं और फिर हम बोलते हैं कि हम इसको ratify कर देंगे. Ratify मतलब after becoming a signatory, you become a ratifier, which means that now each and every provision of this document becomes binding on you. मतलब अगर आपने नहीं करा तो UN can have actions against you, जो कि इसी डॉक्यूमेंट में लिखे होंगे कि अगर हमारे प्रोविजंस फॉलो नहीं करे तो हम क्या एक्शन के अगेंस्ट लेंगे. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड रैटिफिकेशन. सॉर्टेड. अब मेरे को बताओ जल्दी से, पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम कब इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ था? 1861 में. इंक्लूजन ऑफ इंडियन इन एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल कब हुआ था? पूरा क्वेश्चन सुनते नहीं और हम आंसर टाइप करने लग जाते हैं. इंक्लूजन ऑफ इंडियन इन एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल 1909. SP सिन्हा, फर्स्ट लॉ मेंबर ऑफ द एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल. जो सब टाइप कर रहे थे 1861, दैट इज इंक्लूजन ऑफ इंडियन इन द लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल. और उधर कौन किस किस को इंक्लूड किया गया था 1861 वाले में? कौन कौन थे? राजा ऑफ बनारस, सेकंड महाराजा ऑफ पटियाला, एंड थर्ड सर दिनकर राव. ठीक है. सो inclusion of Indians in Executive Council, SP Sinha 1909. 1861 Legislative Council inclusion of Indians, Raja of Banaras, Maharaja Patel and Dr. SP Sinha. When were the concept of ordinances introduced? 1861. डायरकी एट सेंटर कब इंट्रोड्यूस हुई थी? वेरी गुड. डायरकी एट स्टेट्स, वेरी गुड. अब अगर 1919 में डायरकी एट स्टेट्स इंट्रोड्यूस हो गई थी और 1935 में डायरकी एट सेंटर इंट्रोड्यूस हुई थी, तो क्या 1935 में डायरकी एट स्टेट्स एग्जिस्ट करती थी या नहीं? डिड इट एग्जिस्ट, यस और नो? डिड डायरकी ऑफ स्टेट्स in exist in 1935, yes or no? No, because they abolished first, then introduced hierarchy at the center. When was bicameralism introduced at states or provinces? Trick question tha ye. Bicameralism was introduced in provinces in 1935 versus 1919 bicameralism was introduced at the center. So when was bicameralism introduced at the center? वेरी गुड. 1919 में सेंटर पर आ गया था. 1935 में 6 प्रोविंसेस में we introduced bicameralism. When was the concept of direct elections introduced? Direct elections, concept of elections, सिर्फ concept of elections. वेरी गुड. 1892. फर्स्ट टाइम वर्ड कब यूज किया था हमने इलेक्शन? 1892 में कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इलेक्शंस हुआ था बट वर्ड नहीं था. फर्स्ट टाइम वर्ड कब यूज करा हमने? 1909 में. और डायरेक्ट इलेक्शंस कब कराए? 1990. तो 1891, 1909 एंड 1990. पहली बार डायरेक्ट इलेक्शंस यहां हुए. इनडायरेक्ट इलेक्शंस का वर्ड यूज हुआ इलेक्शंस का, और यहाँ पे कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इनडायरेक्ट इलेक्शंस आया. ठीक है. अब मुझे बताओ, which is the act known as the act of communalism in India? Seed the source of communalism in India. Communalism 1909. इसको और क्या कहते हैं? डैश एंड डैश रिफॉर्म्स, मॉर्लिमेंटो रिफॉर्म्स. फादर ऑफ कम्युनलिज्म किसको कहते हैं? लॉर्ड मिंटो को, क्योंकि वो वाइसरॉय थे. तो यहाँ पे सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ मुस्लिम्स के लिए. अब एक ही चार्ट में टाइप करना है चार चीजें कि 1919 में किन किन को कॉमनल सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट को एक्सटेंड किया गया. एक ही चार्ट में, अलग अलग नहीं, एक ही में चारों टाइप करके भेजो. 6 एंग्लो इंडियंस, इंडियन क्रिश्चियंस एंड यूरोपियंस. व्हाट वाज दिस 1919 एक्ट कॉल्ड एज? मोंटेगो चेम्सफोर्ड रिफॉर्म्स. ठीक है, ठीक है. फर्स्ट नहीं, फर्स्ट गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया कौन थे? नॉट विलियम बेंटिक. 1935 में किन किन को हमने, अभी तक तो मुस्लिम्स हो गए थे, 6 हो गए थे, एंग्लो इंडियंस, इंडियन क्रिश्चियंस, यूरोपियंस. अब और किन किन को हमने इलेक्टोरेट की बात करी? 3 लोग बताओ. 1 2 3. शेड्यूल्ड कास्ट, विमेन एंड वर्कर्स. ऑफिस ऑफ हाई कमिश्नर कब आया? फिर दोनों बताओ. सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट कब आया और ऑफिस ऑफ हाई कमिश्नर कब आया? (1919) में ऑफिस ऑफ हाई कमिश्नर आया और 1858 में सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट. साइज ऑफ लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल कितना टू कितना किया गया था इन एक्ट ऑफ 1909? साइज ऑफ लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल कितने से कितना इंक्रीज किया था एक्ट ऑफ 1909 में? 16 to 60. एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल में कौन से एक्ट में ऐड किया गया था फर्स्ट टाइम इंडियन को, और कौन थे वो? एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल में फर्स्ट टाइम कौन से को ऐड किया था और कौन थे वो? एसपी सिन्हा. एक्ट 1909. फर्स्ट टाइम ओपन कंपटीशन फॉर सिविल सर्वेंट्स, 1853. प्रोसेलिटाइजेशन कब आया था? 1813. 1813 में एक और चीज हुई थी. क्या हुई थी? एंड इन मोनोपोली ऑफ ट्रेड एक्सेप्ट विद ट्रेड इन टी एंड विद चाइना. ठीक है. हम एनुअल बजट को डिस्कस कब कर सकते थे? डिस्कशन ऑफ बजट and questions without supplementary questions right in front of you. 1892. In 1892 you could discuss the budget but not alter it. You could ask questions but no supplementary questions. And when was the supplementary questions allowed? When were supplementary questions allowed? 1909. ठीक है. Who was the first viceroy of India? First viceroy of India? Lord Canning. Decentralization कहां से स्टार्ट हुई थी? 1861. 1861 का क्या निमोनिक याद किया था हमने? 4 चीजों के लिए. पोडी. P फॉर 1861 में पोडी किया था. P फॉर पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम. Which viceroy introduced the portfolio system? लॉर्ड कैनिंग. अच्छा, अब आया तो 1861 एक्ट में था, बट ऑफिशियली पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम कौन सी ईयर में आया था? आई एम नॉट आस्किंग अबाउट द एक्ट बट द ईयर इन विच पोर्टफोलियो सिस्टम केम. एक्ट लीगलाइज्ड इट बट 1859. वेरी वेरी गुड. ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस कब कहते थे? द वर्ड ब्रिटिश पोजेशंस केम व्हेन? 1784. When was the concept of dual control came? When did the concept of dual control come? Dual control 1784. When were acts called? उससे पहले regulations बोलते थे, laws बोलते थे, अब उनको act कब बोलने लगे? प्रियांशु, there are varying reasons for it. जैसे कि साइमन कमीशन कब आई थी, then उनके साल कंफर्म होने वाले थे, then there was a change in the British regime. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. पहली बार लेजिस्लेटिव और एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शंस को कब डिफरेंशिएट किया गया था? फर्स्ट टाइम व्हेन वर लेजिस्लेटिव एंड एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शंस चेंज्ड और मतलब डिलिनेटेड एज बीइंग डिफरेंट. फंस गए? 1853 for the first time the legislative and the executive functions of the Governor General's Council were separated. Supplementary questions कब पूछ सकते थे? Supplementary questions इन बजट वगैरह या सप्लीमेंट्री क्वेश्चंस 1909. चलो बढ़िया. एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन पूछ लेते हैं. विद whom did the residuary powers lie? Residuary powers किसके पास थी? Not with the center but with the viceroy or the governor general of provinces. Very good. Good job guys. Very proud. Starting में तो बहुत ही बुरा हाल था, तो खुद पढ़कर आए थे तो बुरा था, बट अभी थोड़ा ठीक लगा. Which means that when you read it for the second time you knew everything now. तो ऐसे ही आगे से हम ऐसी जितनी भी चीजें याद करने वाली है ऐसे पढ़ेंगे, मतलब खुद से पढ़कर आएंगे, and will not waste the time in the class, because after this when we start part B you will have a lot of things before preamble. Constituent Assembly कौन था, क्या था, कैसे था, कितने लोग थे, all of these are रटने वाली चीजें होंगी और बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है स्टेट पीसीएस के लिए भी, अदर यूपीएससी एग्जाम्स के लिए भी, that you know polity का core also. So from next time onwards viceroy and governor general मैंने explain किया था. We'll be a little careful with this. So I'll take up your class tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll take up all the questions that are there, whatever and whichever are doubts. थोड़ा quickly करेंगे, मतलब मैं poll नहीं करवा पाऊंगा. मतलब in the next class I will not be conducting polls because then we will be wasting a lot of times. I'll move from question to question quickly, which means that you will have to read and do the questions at home, solve them, all of them, and then come in the class so that we directly take up the discussions of those questions and not waste time in polls. Is that okay with everyone? ठीक. Akshita, I am answering this for the 10th time in 3 days. That will decide the timings of the group once the subgroups are formed. On that note, I take your leave. Thank you for joining in. आज मजा आया नहीं आया ये बता दो यार एक बार. ठीक है, तो अब ऐसे ही करेंगे. और ये बहुत सारे लोग आंसर राइटिंग का भी बोल रहे हैं. I'll take up the model answer for the secularism question that I gave tomorrow and also take up all the PYQs. Anything else that you want me to change? Because from Monday we'll start with part B. I'll try to upload the whole Polity PDF by tonight. सारे प्रिंट आउट लेकर स्पाइरल कराकर जो करना है, you just keep it ready with you and we'll start from Monday with part B. I'm also giving you tomorrow, today, if you've already completed PYQs, revise everything, learn everything. अगर I am guaranteeing you that you do not need to refer to any other standard book, but if 1 month down the lane you feel that your seniors or anybody else has asked you to read Lakshmikant and you will read Lakshmikant, if that is the case कि fear of missing out रहेगा ये रहेगा, मेरे को नहीं चाहिए कि आप ये पढ़ो, बट अगर आपको ऐसा लगता है कि 2 महीने बाद आप पढ़ोगे तो उसको आज ही पढ़ना स्टार्ट कर दो with simultaneously with the chapters you're doing. Okay, please if you feel that you'll have a fear of missing out, do that. Otherwise don't, because otherwise after 2 months you'll again read polity and waste your time. That will be the time of revision. Homework अब तक जितना भी है, revise all PYQs, the same homework as yesterday. Write your answers. 4th, consolidate everything. 5th, print out part B and spiral it. Anything else? सेमी प्रेसिडेंशियल वाला भी एक होमवर्क था, और एक और चीज मैंने बोली थी, हाँ, शॉर्ट नोट्स ऑफ हिस्टोरिकल अंडरपिनिंग्स, वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. और क्योंकि यू विल आल्सो हैव सैटरडे एंड संडे नाउ, सो आई वांट ऑल ऑफ यू टू हैव शॉर्ट नोट्स ऑफ दिस आफ्टर यू रीड इट फॉर द सेकंड टाइम. एक बार हमने क्लास में पढ़ लिया, बहुत सारी बार मैंने पूछ लिया, यू विल रीड इट टुमारो एंड टुडे व्हिच इज योर होमवर्क, एंड ऑन संडे short notes for all the 48 pages. All the 48 pages. Akansha, for mains we'll also give you something extra, but yes, for conceptual clarity for mains this will be enough. For keywords, value addition, current affairs, data, we'll also give you, keep on giving new content. कोई मेरे को homework properly लिखकर Telegram पे DM कर दो, I'll forward that homework as it is on our official channel for everybody. Whole homework, जितने भी 6-7 points थे, सारे लिखकर मेरे को एक बार DM कर दो. On that note, I'll take your leave. Thank you for joining in. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
What we understand, we conquer.